Академия Бойчук от Киев и ние мислим, че те са страхотни. Още нещо трябва ли да говорим? Може би вече не трябва? Може би по-добре да ме втърнем.
Ами че окей. Това е стрима чуда. То няма нищо общо с дума.
We wish it's not a coffee. We wish it's not a coffee, it's something stronger.
It's around noon, I think, in the US.
Yes.
check, 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 check. Говоря, говоря, говоря. Май не се чувам.
Еми, кой да влезе? Чакай, Жоро. Трябва още някой да влезе в стаята, защото в момента имам само един човек. И защо?
Да излезем всички. Ние сме 6. Стаята сега. Всички да излезем, да влезем завтра.
Все още имаме технически проблеми, нищо не
Няма нужда за сега.
Да. Ей, чувате ли ме? Ей.
Технически.
Ей.
Интересно предложение. Аз предлагам. Да не снимаме зала. Просто ние, Жоро, ще седнем тук. Ще говорим.
Еми, ако още до 5 минути не сме го направили, ще дам това предложение.
Да, защото това е просто и ефективно.
Бояне, чуваш ли ме? Дава ли сигнал? Нещо? Хора, може ли да влезете в стаята, моля?
Ние всички сме в стая.
Значи ще е друга стая.
Значи, ние сме в тази стая, към която Хриси ни даде линка. Така че е проблема.
Okay, I can hear myself now. In the room, that is, not only here on the phone. Okay, there is a little delay now on my side. Говоря, 0,3, 0,3, чек. Ей, няма нищо. Ей.
We have some moments probably to say about it. Is it possible, Georgi, is it possible for us to communicate a little bit for this short period?
Yes, I think just have in mind that all the people in the room are listening to you and seeing you. It's not only me.
Okay. So dear friends, I'm so happy to see all of you, and I'd like to say my special thank you to Boyka and Eliot, because it is thanks to you today we had a beautiful opportunity to make the prizes for the participants of our competition that have just finished some minutes ago. And in my presentation, I will show you the work of the winner of this school students competition. The person hasn't been informed yet that she is a winner, but you will be those first people who will know the name of the person who has got the first prize in Shakespeare. competition, okay? So thank you very much, Boyka.
We're both pleased. That's the least we could do.
Thank you.
Are we waiting for some tech intervention on the part of
Yes, I'll let you know. They're still working on the camera and the sound and everything, yeah. Because we didn't have such a panel yet. This is the first one. There will be one later today. So,
so we will do it today.
Yeah, the tech guys are setting this up right now for the first time. So.
It adds a sense of suspense and drama to it. So very nice.
Sorry about it, yeah. But
this feels like actually this isn't bad for Zoom. So.
And Nyagolov is racing, literally racing toward the deadline as we speak. That's also fun. And Desislava is like, the ghost in the machine. Is there a Desislava or is this a fictional account?
I'll be curious how the technology goes. I know that over at Salem State, my colleague Julie Kiernan is doing, I think she's doing like a response back to their presenting as you like it later today. So we're going to have technology over in the U.S. and hopefully that technology is working too. I have no idea. These things are so complicated when you get down to technology. So.
We're getting pushed to move away from Zoom institutionally to, I think it's, I think Zoom Maker didn't introduce our tech yet.
Well, we've been doing, I don't know about
Theis.
Oh, yeah, Teams. They've moved us to Teams, Microsoft.
All right. I think we're going to be starting right now. We have improvised conditions. Unfortunately, we cannot see the audience. We have some live audience in the room behind our desk. They asked Georgi and Natalia. Yeah, because yes, because they would like to have some private space with the speakers without our intimidating presence.
Okay, there is two of us here, so we are stuck in a small room, just as not to interfere with the sound in the big room. So you have an audience in one room, and you have us in another room. So it is our pleasure to start this seminar, which is very aptly called Black Box. Daria is going to explain to you what it means exactly.
Yeah, I think this is a very powerful metaphor, and I need to thank Sanjina for coming up with it. It was complete improvisation, but I think it holds so much meaning within it. It's so multi-layered. So on the one hand, the black box is a usually complicated electronic device whose internal mechanism is hidden from or mysterious to the user. And this is exactly what is happening right now, because the workings of the whole system are completely mysterious, to me at least.
Well, we just hope it doesn't mean this little device which is usually put in airplanes in order to try and find out why a crash happened after the crash. Hopefully we won't crash this time. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to Boyka. Boyka, would you like to go first? Or, Katie disappeared.
Oh yeah. If Katie is ready with my PowerPoint.
Well, while Katie is getting ready, I need to expand a little bit on the metaphor, because you cannot leave it there.
Okay, go ahead. Now you have time.
Yeah, we have time till Cat is back, so this is my spotlight moment. Because black box is also something else. It's the type of the theater, which actually provides more space for experiment and for theater magic to happen. And it also provides a lot of space for improvisation, exactly what we are doing right now. So I think it's a very apt metaphor, but also black box is something that magicians are using to work magic, and you never know what will come out of this box. So it can be anything, just like within our festival.
Something like Hogwarts sorting hat.
Exactly, something like Hogwarts sorting hat. Within our festival, we managed to connect many dots which seemed unrelated, but now they are a part of a bigger picture.
Can you hear us well enough?
I do, but it varies. It's up and down, and there are moments when you're frozen. Maybe I should move rooms. Yeah, to
Maybe it's not your fault. Yeah.
Maybe it's our
Well,
fault.
who knows? You never know whose fault is it. But certainly it's not the human fault, it's the AI. Okay. Moving.
Can you hear us?
Just a moment. It seems, yeah, it seems better. Okay. Oh, let me just make sure that this doesn't.
On the upside, we have tested almost every piece of equipment we have here at the university until we get to the right configuration.
It's like the black box. Eventually, it's going to work out.
It's getting really interesting. Okay, I believe I'm ready.
Okay, so now we are waiting for Katie on this.
Okay.
Because I think she's appeared. Here she comes.
Out of the black box.
Oh, this is much better. It's
Life is getting better always. Means
All the time.
that's the optimistic view of life. Yeah, the bubbles is always half empty.
Well, it's completely full because there is water and there is air. So
That's philosophical.
you know, the Beatles. It's getting better all the time. This is the song that I grew up with, and it's become my motto. So maybe next year we need to do more talks on Shakespeare and music.
Yeah.
Shakespeare and the Beatles.
Yeah. Well, it's getting better all the time. I remember there's also a line in there, "It can't get much worse." Is also in that song. That's a yeah. So I'm seeing like 5 different Katies here. It's like this is getting very interesting. So
I can see only one.
Katie is multiplied.
I am here.
Shakespeare with all the multiple faces.
I'm looking at common network parameter research and headquarters. Okay, I'm gonna leave and try to rejoin you. How is it?
But somehow,
Am I clear through? No.
maybe we need to tell the host
Okay.
to leave only the version of Katie that has the camera on.
Okay.
And just
I'll do it right now. I'll be back.
turn off the other three versions.
Okay.
I don't know if you see the sounds. No, it's
We can see you, but when you speak, Katie, there is an echo.
okay, I'm gonna leave the meeting and rejoin.
Yeah. No, you don't need to do that. Stay online. We will try to close down the other three versions of you. Because but this happens in the adjacent room, so it will take a minute.
My question is though, do you see me or do you see a photo of
Sorry
me?
for the delay.
We can see you on camera, but then we have also three more versions of you in which we see only your picture. But we can hear the sound from all four.
Yeah. I have grown, I have achieved my life goal. Okay, I will leave and I'll come back.
Okay, but maybe log out from all the devices, or
I only have one device.
So I don't know what's going on. It's the ghost in the machine, in the black box.
Yeah.
Next year we're pulling it black box.
Now one version of data box.
It's just one person. Okay. I cannot leave.
Айде мютнете тия трите, които...
Няма как, това е от нея. Тоест тя трябва да напусне и да влезе отново най-вероятно.
Окей. Сега го правим. So, Katie signed out and she's going to sign in again. There she comes. Everything is alright now, I think. Okay, so maybe we are ready to start. So if Katie, if you can put Boyka's presentation on the screen, I will just introduce Boyka to everyone. So Professor Boyka Sokolova teaches Shakespeare and Shakespearean performance at the University of Notre Dame, which is an American university based in London. And she is one of the founding members of the European Shakespeare Research Association and our very, very dear colleague, one of the greatest Shakespeareans from Bulgaria working abroad. So Boyka, the floor is yours. The presentation is on the screen, we can see it.
Well, thank you, Georgi. It's an enormous pleasure to be with you and to be part of this international conference, Sledata Shakespeare, or Tracing Shakespeare. And in my 15 minutes, I'll try to say a few words about productions which have been targeted very clearly on Generation Z, on the youngest viewers in the theatre. Now, what's happening, particularly in London this season, is that it seems that Hollywood stars are massively on the London stages, especially stars from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We have Brie Larson, who plays Electra. We have Jonathan Bailey of Bridgerton fame, who played Richard II. Tom Hiddleston and Haley Atwell, who are Marvel stars. Sigourney Weaver, a star of the older generation, who played Prospero, and of course Kate Blanchett, who is performing Arkadina in The Seagull and The Barbican. One of the productions I will talk about is Much Ado About Nothing, with Tom Hiddleston and Hayley Atwell. But the other production, which is not in London, but at the Royal Shakespeare Theatre's company's theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, is a production which is quite different from the London one I'm going to present. It is a Hamlet directed by Rupert Gould. And there are no two productions than Jamie Lloyd's at Drury Lane and Rupert Gould's at the RSC, which are more different, it seems, this season. I've entitled my presentation Generation Z because I will use materials from the written work submitted by my students who saw these two productions. And I would like you to hear what they had to say. Now, Jamie Lloyd, and this picture here really gives a very clear sense of what the theatre, before the performance started, looked like. Put on his Much Ado at Drury Lane, which is a major West End theatre, which belongs to Andrew Lloyd Webber, and is known for high production values and musicals. The last Shakespeare play performed there was 70 years ago, Peter Brook's Tempest with John Gielgud as Prospero. And Webber wanted to reopen after a huge restoration of the old theatre, wanted to reopen business again with Shakespeare plays. So it's not surprising that the first Shakespeare this season was the one with Sigourney Weaver as Prospero. The second production, Jamie Lloyd's on Drury Lane, Jamie Lloyd's Much Ado, is in a way, if we look at the longer context of the history of Drury Lane, is a kind of gesture of modern stars to the greatest past star on Drury Lane, one of the founders, founding actor-managers of Drury Lane, David Garrick, and who performed in Much Ado there in 1784, and is actually the man who enabled Shakespeare to become the national poet, something which Michael Dodson has written beautifully about in his book, The Making of the National Poet. So, here we are in Drury Lane Theatre, the West End, 2025. So, where does Much Ado take place? Where are we? As the critic of Time Out suggested, it seems to be somewhere between heaven, Ibiza, and a novelty Instagram backdrop, with a vibe of endless hedonistic holiday, full of dance and mischief. There was no conventional set, but a thick layer of candy pink confetti that covered the huge stage of Drury Lane. As the audience entered, as we saw in the first image, they entered 1990s disco with music, lights, and with ushers dancing in the aisles. This upbeat tone continued through the entire performance. My students immediately captured connections, defined connections between what this stage looked like and what was very much in the culture around. They wrote about this design being like an adaptation of Greta Gerwig's 2023 blockbuster Barbie, and said that, as in a Barbie movie, the action occurs entirely during the day with a brightly lit stage, while the characters are often portrayed singing and dancing with a love for sparkles, cheerfulness, and the color pink. Apart from the pink confetti, and you can see this well in this picture, the other element of the set was a giant pink heart-shaped balloon, which was lowered down and was instrumental in the scenes where Benedict and Beatrice were tricked into falling in love with each other. And both these elements, the confetti and the heart, were used to high comedic effect. Tom Hiddleston tossed clumps of confetti into the air, which also ended up covered the clothes of the audience in the front rows. And this caused much amusement. He used to bury himself in the confetti and to hide in plain sight in that particular scene, receiving a round of applause every time he moved in the pile of confetti. He also rolled from under the cart where he had hidden at one point, and then disappeared in a stage trap almost miraculously, which caused peals of laughter. As you can see here, at the end of the masked ball, because there is such a scene in Much Ado, this photo captures very well the nature of the masks characters were wearing. And my students immediately noticed that the masks were fashioned after emoji, which gave another modern element to the production. Now, Hiddleston's portrayal of Benedict felt like a combination of his popular Marvel character Loki with Ryan Gosling's character Ken in Barbie, as my students thought. Hayley Atwell also, they immediately connected her with her film characters, and they felt that she imbued the character of Beatrice with many of the same qualities as her well-known Marvel character. And in direct reference to their cinematic characters, life-size cutouts of their characters, Peggy Carter and Loki, were used in the blissfully absurd scenes where they're tricked falling in love with each other, which caused enormous fun in the theatre. Now, one of the things which critics noted in this production was its carefree nature, so much so that when it comes to the darker moments related to Hero, these were really very much downplayed in a way. And given that Jamie Lloyd is not someone who avoids political controversy, critics try to explain why that carefree, what this carefree reading of the play might mean. And here is one opinion. The absence of direct political themes, one critic writes, becomes political in itself, suggesting that retreating into pleasure, detachment, and camaraderie can be a form of resistance or denial in a world increasingly shaped by crisis. One of my students gave a slightly different interpretation. What makes Much Ado About Nothing so remarkable, she wrote, is that it does not take itself too seriously and invites its audience to do the same. Now, the other production, Hamlet, is quite different in its tone. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, everything is fine.
Ah, okay. So, Katie, would you, yes, we're here, this is what the stage looked like at the beginning. Generally, this Hamlet takes place on board of a sinking ship, and the ship is very clearly marked. This is the Titanic, just before it sank. So, to give you an idea of what my students felt and what they thought about this production, yes, that's that one. And what they felt about this production, I'll read from different reviews which they wrote. This is how they saw the positioning of the production. Rupert Booth's Titanic-tinged production of Hamlet is both unsettled and unsettling. Unsettled, literally, because its ship-shaped stage bucks and tilts as the chaotic events of the play escalate, and unsettling because of the questions it provokes about the future of our own ship of state. Denmark's inevitable demise is foreshadowed before the first line is spoken by the ominous flashing red text which spells out the date of the Titanic disaster, 14th of April, 1912. What unfolds across the vessel's violently tilting boards is a tale of grief, madness, power, and betrayal, made freshly claustrophobic and disorientating. By the end of the single feverish night, the stage has tilted nearly vertical, and Denmark, like the unsinkable Titanic, has sunk, dragging below the murky waters, dragged below the murky waters by the madness of its rulers. One of the things which the students appreciated in this production was its cinematic nature, the sense of constant movement, which was conveyed not just by the tilting of the stage towards the end of the production, but by the projection of an ever-turbulent sea at the back. Also, we could hear the noise of the raging waters and the creaking of the deck. And indeed, they appreciated this, saying that the production offers a cinematic experience in the theatre that modern audiences have come to expect. And that is interesting to remember. This is an expectation of our modern audiences. No single image, another student continues, captures this effect better than the final one we are left with. Hamlet, could you move to it? Oh, yeah, that's it. Hamlet, arms outstretched, cast in a beam of light, with the stage dangerously tilted. The pose evokes Christ or Jack Dawson on the prow of the Titanic. Unlike Jack, however, who proclaims himself the king of the world, Talon's Hamlet is king of nothing, his father's empire condemned to the waves by his myopic quest for revenge. This Hamlet succeeds in delivering 3 hours of sublime entertainment and in reminding us that if unstable ruling elites are allowed free rein, they could sink us all. And I think this is a really good political reading done by representatives of Generation Z to what we saw in Hamlet. So, between the endless dancing in Ibiza-styled ado to the dark waters of the sinking ship of state in Hamlet, we're indeed in a modern world of contrasts. And I think our students understand that and are very aware of the consequences. Thank you.
Thank you, Boyka, for this fantastic talk. Yeah, it is very, very relevant. So my suggestion would be to collect the questions for the end and proceed directly with Katie. So, Kiriuko or Katie Stavreva?
And muting.
This is our colleague, yeah, very esteemed Shakespeare scholar, again from Bulgaria, but living and working in the US right now. She's teaching at Cornell College, and she's also a member of the European Shakespeare Association. Katie, it is your turn.
It is such a pleasure to be here. Well, not to be here, but to be with you, even though not here, not there. These pronouns are very, very tricky. I'm going to share a hybrid talk, which is part personal essay and part scholarship, because that's the stage of my career that I'm at. I'm mixing and matching everything right now. And it is a remembrance. So unlike Boyka, I'm going to travel back in time, and then I'm going to travel even further back in time. In January 2016, I responded to a call issued by Oxford University's Bodleian Library to small presses everywhere in the world to commemorate Shakespeare's 400-year legacy by contributing to a new hand-printed, wildly artistic collection of Shakespeare's sonnets. So hand-printed and letterpress printed, the two terms for the same thing. It is basically using this ancient printing technology, which in my case, using this iron hand press that dates back from 1876, that's how old it is, doesn't even need electricity, let alone a Zoom connection in order to function. It is very, very reliable. All you need is light and ink and paper. My first choice for this occasion was Sonnet 129. The expansive spirit in a waste of shame is lust in action. That amazing poem about, I quote, perjured, murderous, bloody, full of blades, savage, extreme, rude, cruel, not to trust, phallocentric desire. The kind that was apparently so much for one 17th century reader that he stored it out of his copy of the 1609 edition of Shakespeare's sonnets. I was, however, outpaced by another printer, and so I got my second choice, Sonnet 122. Thy gift, thy tables are within my brain full charactered with blasting memory. This is a completely different poem, a poem about memory and the tools used by writers to perpetuate it. but also a poem about forgetfulness, guilt, and attempting to cover up one's oversights. As Shakespeare's sonnets go, 122 is a humble one. I welcome the challenge of dwelling through the slow process of letterpress printing on this more tentative, less assured part of Shakespeare's legacy, one with which I connected on multiple levels. A scholar, as daughter who lost her mother to Alzheimer's, and as a spouse who supports the love of her life on his Parkinson's journey, I'm haunted by the phenomenon of forgetting. Like many of us, I have my little arsenal of memory aids, mnemonics, lecture notes, sticky notes, PowerPoint images, routines, cell phone reminders, unsolicited memory prompts from various apps. They have often saved the day. When they haven't, those around me so far have been forgiving. But I also live with the constant fear that in the daily hustle and bustle, I might lose track of a memory that I owe to a loved one. I might forget a birthday, a promise, a prescription, and thus I may break trust. Critics often write about the dramatic nature of Shakespeare's sonnets, how closely they resemble character studies, how these 14-line monologues are given full development in the plays. Closing couplet or not, the sonnets are intrinsically open. They present an invitation to unfold into other media, to be remembered with a difference. About Sonnet 122, Stanley Wells and Paul Edmondson, in their study of the sonnets, suggest, I quote, "It could be Hamlet trying to remember the ghost's words and injunctions. To keep an adjunct to remember thee were to import forgetfulness in me." Hamlet's is the pure memory of the brilliant young scholar and actor, assured in the privilege of his Wittenberg education and his royal rank, one who needs no material prompt to hold on to what he loves and believes in. He delays, but does not forget. It is women's memories in the plays that seem to need an adjunct, or at least that's what the male characters believe. Hamlet gives Ophelia material remembrances, which she returns. Othello gives Desdemona a handkerchief, which she misplaces. The loss of these adjuncts spell death. The poetic persona in Sonnet 122 is male, but like the women in Shakespeare's tragedies, he occupies a lower social rank than his addressee, the unnamed, well-born male youth who is able to afford stylish gifts, and who, like Othello, demands to know where these gifts are. The youth does not issue a deadly threat, but nevertheless, the demand to know where the gift of the tables is unsettles the poet. So the tables here, the tables whose loss or worse may be re-gifting provides the occasion for this sonnet, were actually compartmentalized wax-covered wooden, or, as is more likely in this case, ivory tablets for handwritten notes. So you can see the stylus that, the handwriting was happening in, and I don't know how well the big screen shows the tables, but they're, in the middle here. And this is their leather case. The tables within which this wax was poured. So this is a kind of finely crafted gift that would have spoken volumes about the high esteem in which the youth held poetry and the poet. But it is also a gift that is testimony to the high education and material wealth of the gift giver. 122 comes toward the end of the opening section of 126 sonnets, as arranged by Thomas Thorpe in the 1609 edition, which address and refer to this well-born young man. The stark contrast between this set of poems and the remaining ones, which feature or address a dark woman, is not limited to the gender factor. As Margrethe de Grazie has argued, the division between these two parts of the sonnet sequence runs between, quote, hierarchy and anarchy, or desired generation and abhorred miscegenation, unquote. Speculations about the young man have run amok for 5 centuries, fueled by Thorp's opening dedication, we get to it, in the sonnet's first edition. To the only begetter of these unsung sonnets, Master W.H., all happiness, and that eternity promised by our everlasting poet wisheth the well-wishing adventurer in setting forth T.T. The dedication follows a tantalizing promise of poetry never before imprinted on the title page on the left side of the slide. The layout of the dedicatory page chosen by the sonnet's first printer emulates the inscription on Roman monuments, which endure to this day. Yet, if that little quarto volume of the sonnets is a monument, it is a monument that mangles memory. We can safely assume that the well-wishing adventurer on the dedication page is the printed Thomas Thorpe, T.T. After all, he is the one who set forth the sonnets for the public. But who is Master W.H.? In dedications at the opening of Renaissance books, begetter, the one begetter, usually means inspirer. It's a rhetorical gesture of supplication toward a patron of high rank, but it also has obvious erotic overtones. The two main candidates for who this young begetter might be, which have been brought out by the critics, include Henry Grossley, the 3rd Earl of Southampton, with the initials transposed by perhaps a careless typesetter, and the younger William Herbert, 3rd Earl of Pembroke. The book's dedication, then, functions as a sort of conjoint commemoration on the part of the printer of the eternal memory promised to the Earl, one of them anyway, of the ever-living poet who has promised it. Or, as Sonnet 122 has it, it is the memory of the young nobleman scored into the tables of the poet's mind that combats the erasure of time. The early moderns imagined the mind as a book, which was neatly compartmentalized and indexed. The endurance of memory, however, is that of books, and that has obvious limitations. Because of its reliance on natural vehicles, memory's retention has a biological expiration date, no matter the assurance in the opening of Sonnet 122 that the memory of the young man will, quote, remain beyond all day, even to eternity. I mean, look at Thorpe's dedication. Who is W.H.? The dramatized tension between the ardent promise of eternal memory in the opening portrait of Sonnet 122 and the disenchantment regarding the inevitable degradation of brain and heart into, quote, raised oblivion in the second stanza drove my choice of printing material. I first printed this sonnet on pristine white, ink-thirsty Leaves BFK paper. It's the printer's dream, going for a contrast between remembering the impression of type into the paper fibers and forgetting the white page. Something was missing. The final product failed to convey the layering of memories, the very quality that makes them elusive and unreliable. The gentle bite of the type into the cotton fibers of the paper was appropriate for rendering the poet's declaration of his lasting memory of the gift-gifting boy. However, it suggested very little about memory shifts, let alone about memory erasure. I needed something else to print on, something supple and substantial, durable and fragile. And that's when I recalled an earlier experiment with printing on birch veneer. The material had a genetic resemblance to the writing tables of the poem. Birch veneer also has other advantages. It takes ink very eagerly. Let me get to that image. Yes. It takes ink very eagerly and offers more resistance than paper to charactering, that is to the bite of the metal type that imparts ink into the fibers of the receiving surface. As you can see on the right side of this slide, my colophon, which basically says what this print is, when and where it was produced. My colophon, which used the smaller size type, 10-point type, has some charactering issues, and these issues have been exacerbated by the imperfect leveling of my hand press. The wood also offered the kind of resistance that allowed for a semi-decent printing of the copper frame ornament that you can also see on the right-hand side. When I printed on paper, this ornament insisted on bleeding red ink into the soft fibers of the paper, more drama than I was looking for. As I learned when a friend reported that my wooden card had arrived broken in the mail, and I think that friend may be here, it was as fragile as overwrought brains. Finally, the wood texture offered a visual reminder of nature's capacity to subsist. I chose the vertical orientation of the tree lines, which I'm hoping you can see, I don't know about the resolution, on the veneer, as a subtle statement about the strain between the desire to combat time by means of artistic memorializing and the indifference of nature to this desire. As a love sonnet, 122 offers a refreshing dramatization of the low blows delivered by a defensive lover, one moreover who holds a lower social status than his beloved. The opening stanza promises that the poet's memory of the young man's gift, I quote, shall above that idle rank remain, beyond all date, even to eternity. Here's an awkward compliment, if I ever saw one. Going to be remembered more fondly than the idle rank, the worthless multitude, because of his memorable gift, so memorable that the poet gave it away. Or does the poet self-consciously idealize the memory of the gift as opposed to its trivial material reality, its idle rank? Perhaps the writing tables, which the youth gifted to the poet, were made of wood, after all, and not of ivory, and the poet is just griping about it. A few lines later, the tables are called poor retention, a description suggesting some emotional attachment, a bit removed from the offensiveness of idle rank, but not much. This is a poem, I think, that ultimately breaks not only the classical trope that poetry perpetuates, but also basic rhetorical conventions regarding social status. So here's the full version of the poem printed on veneer with the vertical lines of the vignette, which I think here are clearly obvious. I chose to allude to this rhetorical passive aggressiveness on the part of the poet through the broken frame ornament in the lower red corner. Since the dawn of the print age, red and black have been traditional choices in commemorative printing, including biblical printing. My first impulse was to use red for the ornamental initial T that you can see at the very opening of the sonnet, but I decided that its secure enclosure in its own frame, young man, does not merit the dramatic quality of the color red. Combative red for inking Shakespeare's name, and the broken and imperfectly charactered frame of social decorum was a more appropriate choice. I had the hardest time printing the partial frame, which I had acquired especially for this project, but which was showing the marks of a long life of service. It was battered. And then I decided that the imperfection of the inking was a very good match for the fragmentary nature of the border. In 1598, Francis Mears referred to Shakespeare's sonnets, which were being distributed individually in manuscript, as sugared. Certainly, they have seen their share of sugared editions, notably one brought out in 1640 by the bookseller John Benson. Among other changes, Benson gave the sonnets titles and transformed the young man from the first 126 sonnets into a woman. Sugaring, so you can see the title of my sonnet 122. Sugaring the sonnets persisted well into the 19th century. So here's a 19th century edition, title page of the sugared editions titled Some Well-Known Sugared Sonnets by William Shakespeare, resugared with ornamental borders, designed by Edwin J. Ellis and etched by Tristram J. Ellis. In the dedication addressed to Dear Midmaster W.H., that's the W.H. from Thorpe's edition, the publisher apologizes for having the lines in the 10 sonnets chosen for his edition be addressed to a lady, and for having little baby ladies in the edge borders, illustrating the dramatic action in the sonnets. The reason for choosing baby ladies rather than presumably baby gentlemen is that, I quote, "The taste of the day refuses to endure such violently petty adoration coming from one man friend to another, as Master W.S. addressed to you. I know that the whole set of poems are a moral exhortation to you to be good and be married and have as many lovely children like yourself as you can. And when you went astray a little, you were most tenderly prayed to remember how valuable to those that loved you was your good reports." As late as 1964, the homoerotic charge of sonnets 1 through 126 was denied, and they were remembered as idealized, non-sexual love for youth. And that including by the openly homosexual poet W.H. Auden in his preface to William Barton's edition of the sonnets. It's a fire engine outside, sorry. Now, Shakespeare is not completely averse to sugaring socially provocative sexuality and uncouth emotions in his poems. In Sonnet 122, for instance, he sugared thus the promise of eternal memory to the young man, so as to blunt the edge of class animosity toward the younger man-begetter, and to blunt the edge of his bitter awareness of the natural limits of memory. In my design of the sonnet, I too used a modicum of sugar. I provided a diagonal balance. Let me get back to that sonnet so you can see it. I provided a diagonal balance between the ornamental initial T and the partial frame on the lower side, lower right side, and also color balance between the red title and the frame ornament. In a gesture to the memory of the first printed edition of the sonnet, I opted for the original spelling of the text, but of course I didn't have in my type collection, all of these early modern pieces of type, and so I had to make do with modern orthography. I also cleaned up some obvious compositor's errors as the one that you see circled in the slide in front of you. But I tried to stay true to a humble, verbally flailing sonnet in the collection, and was quite content when the printing was done about that deeper bite of the title with Shakespeare's name and the Roman sonnet number bitter indentation into the fiber of the veneer. We'll remember 122, after all, as a sonnet with some teeth. So thank you, and this is the memory of me setting the type for the sonnet.
Thank you, Katie, for this very interesting and sugary, but also biting story. Thank you very much. And now I would like to welcome in this company Jeffrey Theis, who is teaching at Salem State University in the USA, with which New Bulgarian University of Lake has a partnership. And we're just beginning to collaborate with each other. So thank you very much. Jeffrey, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you very much, and good to meet everybody. So I'm going to give, these were beautiful presentations already, so mine's kind of a little compilation, so I'm edging off of how polished it is, but I do have a PowerPoint, so I will share that. Hopefully I can bring this up to, for all of us to take a look at. And so this is, let's see if I can get us to, yeah, okay. So my approach is to Shakespeare ecological, eco-critical, thinking about the environment and nature and how human beings inhabit the world. And Shakespeare is just rife with it, with going off to forests and plants and things like that. So I'm trying to kind of take a look at two parts. So plants and forests in Shakespeare and his work, and the subtitle, The Human is Natural, as opposed to the human versus, or culture versus natural kind of binary that we often get. Okay, so part one, I'll take a look at how Shakespeare represents ways early modern English people forged their own identities. Could be national, could be a communal, like a social or community, and individual through their interactions with English woodland practices. So it's a little bit of a historicist approach. And then part two, we'll kind of move into, so that first part is the forest, and then the second part will be the trees. So individual plants, and what kind of things we can do staging, and also thinking about Shakespeare by moving to the human-plant connection, destabilizing human exceptionalism, and connecting the human to the non-human. And that's a little bit more of a scientific humanities approach. Okay, so this first document is actually a legal document by John Manwood, one of the great names of all English. He wrote a forest, Treatise and Discourse of the Laws of the Forest. This is 1598, right about Shakespeare's time, especially when he's doing a whole bunch of forest comedies and goes off to the forest. And it lays out the forest laws and how people would use forest. It is English-based and English-focused, but all of you Europeans know, actually, when you start digging into this, it overlaps with a lot of European, different countries' conceptions of royal forests and that kind of tradition. So there's going to be a lot of overlap back there. So a forest is not really defined ecologically by its status. So this is especially for those who are students and new to this. You think of forest as just a bunch of trees, but it's actually defined in that time especially not by ecological status, but by legal status. It's a deer hunting ground for the ruler primarily. It's often wooded, but it has enclosed spaces, boundaries, can include towns and villages within it. Nobility and local landowners can own land within a forest. The forest can be used, especially through custom, in different ways by different people in society. So there's different land use practices going on there. Who owns and controls the forest, its resources, and what people can do there is a contentious, explosive issue, which you do get riots and things like that going on in England at the time. There also are, and this is where we get a little more ecological, pervasive concerns regarding deforestation at that time, brought on by multiple factors like firewood, need for firewood. That's still the primary heating control. They're just shifting over to coal at this stage. So firewood, it's housing material, shipbuilding material, and especially for the British who are starting to move into the age of exploration as they follow some of their other, the Spanish and the Portuguese and the French. Ships become very important to them, so they need to make ships. And there are agrarian uses as well within the forest. This is an image of Benfield Lawn in Rockingham, but it gives you kind of a sense of how they represented visually a forest. And you'll notice in the center is like a hunting deer park, and there are big deer there. It really telegraphs to you kind of what these spaces are used for and what's prioritized and what's important there. This is actually a more recent version of Effingham Forest in England right now. All right, so connecting to Shakespeare, forests are places of multiplicity that Shakespeare's plays often engage. They're a place of status, power, privilege for royalty and nobility. It's also a repository of cultural history and tradition, favoring often those in power. It is, though, also, here's the contradictory thing, a place of customary rights and access to resources for the lower classes, a repository of memory, cultural memory, thinking of Katie's kind of talk about memory, lots of cultural memories invested in the forest and in time immemorial practices of using it, that space. And that can often favor counter discourses against those in power, the more localized kinds of views on power. It's a place that literally and figuratively fuels and builds the nation through timber resources as well. And it then becomes also a place of freedom, refuge, or lawlessness, right? So Robin Hood stories, if you know the Robin Hood tradition of counter-revolutionaries or counter-law against an unjust and tyrannical seat of power in the court. The lawlessness of the forest becomes a counter to the law in the court. But this is a place where in early modern England there are population strains and stresses, and while we often focus in history and in literature on people moving to London and the rise of London getting bigger, there actually are people moving to the forest spaces, and they take over forest squatters, take over places and build habitations there. So there's migration that goes to the forests, and that presents some stresses during economic tension times and population growth. Okay, so this is the New Globe Theater, and this is just thinking about ways in which one can stage the forest based on what you know here. And this is the kind of, where are the trees? There are no trees, right? And you know, depending on how accurate you feel that this is to the platform stage of Shakespeare's day, obviously it's super painted and super decorated. But what would be a tree in that stage? Well, those pillars and the posts, probably. So it's going to be imaginative space. It's going to be a space that also is calling upon the London audience to actually know what woodlands are, because they are actually right next door in some ways. So you're going to call on the audience's memory for things, because you aren't staging it. You aren't doing much scenery. Where we do have evidence of, you know, did they put trees on the stage? This is Thomas Kyd's Spanish Tragedy, and this is an image. And on the left here, poor Geronimo is hung up and dead there. But it's an arbor kind of space. It's semi, garden, but it's also used for tree imagery. So there's the possibility that you could stage an individual tree to represent other things. But that's our one example that we really have from Shakespeare's day of what they might do with forests. Then I've got a few images. I just like William Blake's, artwork. So this is a Midsummer Night's, image of Midsummer Night's Dream. So I'm going to present a few versions of how the forest has been staged through the centuries. This is one beautiful, imagery of it. This is actually one of the more famous ones. This is Beerbaum Tree's, nice name that he had, Tree. Famous staging of late 19th century, early 20th century. This is his staging of Midsummer Night's Dream, and you see just how over the top, realistic it's trying to be, but it's almost hyper realistic in the sense of It's so over the top of this lush forest and garden and things like that. So he takes the forest very literally to a certain extent. So much so that, as I have here, they had real grass. He staged it with put real grass, and he had real bunny rabbits. He had rabbits on there that were live. And then we'll counter, and now we got to a bit of the theme of our panel is the black box. Here we go. You know, this is Brooks' very famous Midsummer Night, Peter Brooks' 1970 production of Midsummer Night's Dream. This is the design by Sally Jacobs. So the white canvas walls, floor, 2 doors, trapezes. This is the forest. It is the complete opposite of the beer bomb tree, right? It becomes just an imaginative space. It becomes a place where you play out and form things, but it's not the trees. In fact, here's the tree. So this is one of the images, that little spiraling, looks like a DNA double helix, is actually, that's the tree in that production. So it gives you a view. La Jolla Playhouse, just a couple other more recent ones, you can see that it's a much more urbanized kind of setting. And this one is, I think this one is actually an RSC production. And this is a little more coming back to a little more literal, here's an actual environment that you would take as a forest. So as you can see within those representations, you get very different understandings of what the forest is, and also then very different, what are the activities that happen within the forest? What do they mean? What can they be? And you can play off of that. And what I would say within my arguments in research on that is, in some ways, even the Peter Brooks, which feels very non-ecological, it does tap into the multiplicity of the forest in Shakespeare's early modern times, that it can mean multiple different things to different people, and it's as much of a performative space as it is an ecological space. So that's the big forest, and that's like one way to think about all the forest scenes in various plays, like As You Like It, Midsummer Night's Dream, and things like that. Then I'm going to narrow down here and take a look at the human-plant connection. And unfortunately, to me, it's a neglected play, Cymbeline. But it's actually, the more I spend time with Cymbeline, the romance, it feels like the most ecologically relevant and resonant of his plays going on right now. And we'll think about how human-plant identities can actually make us think about our characters here. So this is Gerard's Herbal, or A History of Plants, which came out, this is 1597, very influential in Shakespeare's day, and it lays out a catalog of plants and also medicinal uses for it. And there's tons of publications actually on household manuals, recipe books, how-to manuals about how to use plants. It could be for cooking, but it's often for medicine, it's for various other practices and uses. And Gerard's book is actually one of the influential ones that builds off of that. So, in kind of more recent with the scientific humanities kind of approach are some of these key terms. So I'm just going to kind of give a highly oversimplified definition of them. But it's thinking about transcorporeality, how different bodies intersect, and that also fits within enmeshment. So, and affordances of how we interact with the environment. So what this is doing, as you look on the left side here, is these are each ways of trying to break up the nature-culture binaries of how we think of, oftentimes within Western civilization, we think about the human over here and the natural over there, and how we divided the two, or how culture and civilization is over here, the natural is over there. And these are all kinds of approaches of finding ways of interconnection and interdependence. So trying to break away those binaries so that human beings, and based on more recent science, as we know, from just prosaic things like the microbiome of our guts, and how so much of the human being is actually filled with other living entities, you know, biotic things that are non-human, and that we are made up of it. So complicating the sense of what's the human and what's the non-human is part of the ecological approaches these days in eco-theory, and that's where transcorporeality, we are other bodies are us, we are enmeshed within our environments. And what does that mean to how we think about things like in Shakespeare? Is going to be played out a little bit in symboling. So the first argument is, of course, Shakespeare doesn't know this stuff. This is contemporary, new knowledge. But lots of ways in which Shakespeare uses the natural world and thinks about the natural world has affinities, and that kind of pop out now for us. So in Cymbeline, it's a very plant and animal focused play. Lots of references to them. And there's many of the characters are compared to plants. And they're compared to plants that I would argue goes beyond just a metaphor, right? It is not necessarily meant to just be a metaphor where we think about one thing as another, but that Shakespeare wants us to entertain the idea of think through the logic much more literally and think materially in what happens. So one of our lead characters, Posthumus, is described in the opening of the play by a couple of gentlemen, and one of the gentlemen says, I cannot delve him to the root. And what goes on in the opening scenes is Posthumus is continuously described as a plant that has been planted by the king Cymbeline, raised up really quickly and vigorously as a vigorous plant that actually within springtime was able already to have a harvest. So he is kind of considered a plant that has grown, but as we have built within it, he's also a plant that has grown actually much quicker than normal and not necessarily appropriately. And then later in the play, he gets exiled to Rome and is moved, transplanted. And there is language within the play which actually talks about him kind of as a plant that has been moved from his native soil to a different soil. And that's in the location where he actually succumbs to misogynistic rants, and he, becomes Othello-like. If other people know that play better, he is an Othello-like character who is tricked into believing his wife has cheated on him. And there's this whole kind of logic of he's a plant that is made vulnerable by being out of his native environment. And then at the play's end, there's this kind of restoration. Along with that, there are two princes abducted, kidnapped, and they are raised in the Welsh wilderness in a cave. And they are described towards the end of the play as two branches that were cut off, lopped off of a cedar tree, which would be Cymbeline, their father. And that restoration of the country and restoration of the family comes at the end when the lopped off branches will be grafted again back to the cedar and will be revitalized. Finally, so these are just some of the examples of plants in the play. There is the evil queen who is a stepmother, and she uses plants and distills them, and she becomes one of the models. She, along with the doctor named Cornelius, are two figures who fit within the early modern proto-scientists kind of mold. They distill from plants various medicines and botanicals, and they fit within the Gerard manuscript that I just showed a couple minutes ago about how you can use this and develop proto-scientific thought. She uses it towards evil ends. She wants to create poisons. And Cornelius kind of understands where she's going. He can see right through her. So he's the one who gives her, instead of a poison, a sleeping drug, which is very much the kind of Friar Lawrence, Romeo and Juliet. It looks like death, but it's just a sleeping drug, a soporific kind of drug. So throughout this play are woven various uses of plants or people as plants as ways of not just advancing the plot, but to develop character and to think about how one connects to the natural world. Right? So you are either part of the natural world as Posthumus or the princes are, Or as the queen goes, I believe I am master of nature. I control nature, I can distill it into the things I want to use, which creates more of that subject-object distinction, which Shakespeare obviously is critiquing very strongly as evil. So that's kind of the ecological kind of reading of plants. And then here are a couple recent productions. So this is the RSC production of Cymbeline on the top from, I think it's, 2023. And you can see that the cave is figured within sticks and branches, which is so definitely the cave and the wood and everything is really playing up in a minimalist approach, the natural, and how one is part of that. And then at the bottom of the images, this is American Players Theater in the US from 2021, which is also representing a forest and the Welsh forest, and that's the character Imogen in cross-dressing disguise going into the forest there. But that's a much more stylized forest, and a little, a different kind of approach. So all of these are kind of pointing to what can you do with it today. So I'm just thinking about the Gen Z, talk and how beautiful that was. One of the things is how do we update, Shakespeare for a modern audience is the rise of eco-theater. And this is how do we respond to climate change and the climate issues that are going on there? How can Shakespeare speak to it? Can Shakespeare speak to it? And there's a whole line now going on in productions that is doing this. So citing or staging of plays in environments that foster eco-connections and thought and critical interventions to think about using the past to engage modern issues and crises, actually. And what it can do is engage and build upon early modern histories of forests and plants to provide pre-industrial views on nature and human connection. It can also then take on new resonances when staging different non-English ecosystems. So this is a lot of eco-theater will just bring into a whole new environment. So let's forget about an English woodland and the history of that, and let's put it into, so in the US we have some of the national parks out in the West, they have some Shakespeare performances. We have had performances in different countries responding to different environments as well. So it can also be adapted to help audiences think about climate change in ways in which human beings embrace or reject their connection to the non-human. And there are a couple examples that I allude to, or I point people to. One is one of my colleagues, Randall Martin, has done a production of Cymbeline in the Anthropocene, and what they did was 7 productions, and I have at the bottom of this slide, which I can share, is a link to it. They've archived the information about the productions. But 7 productions across the globe with several with indigenous groups, and thinking about how Cymbeline can be transported to speak to those environments in those ways and challenge human exceptionalism within that. So that's a very good example of that. And then actually there's just a book just came out now from Bloomsbury, is Shakespeare Ecology and Adaptation, a practical guide for people staging and trying to update Shakespeare for those kinds of conditions. So I think eco-criticism shows the transportability of Shakespeare to modern times, but building off of the history of then. So here are a few of the sources that I have that I can point people to. But that's a quick overview of that approach. All right, thank you very much.
Hey, thanks, Jeffrey. Just before we move on to the last talk, I would like to encourage our colleagues and students who are in the audience, unfortunately you can't see them, but they should think on their questions and text them to us. And first now I pass it over to Daria to introduce our dear colleague and friend Natalia Torkut.
Right, absolutely. I just need to say that you might start wondering in what way these splendid, fascinating talks are connected within this black box. And I need to say that all of them are trying to answer the questions that Snezhina and Georgi asked. the question asked by Snezhina was, in what way can we make all of these articles and the books that we have about Shakespeare relevant to modern contemporary audiences, and how can we make them serve the theater, because everything is done for the theater, right? That's a very important aim for us, to incorporate this information into the theater. And the question that Georgi asked last year, and which was the inspiration behind our festival, is where is Shakespeare today? We have many answers, but one of the answers I found in Jeffrey's presentation, let me just quote, because I know that it was used with a completely different meaning, but it's going to be a bridge to Natalia's talk. A place that literally and figuratively fuels and builds the nation. I know it was said about the forest, but I can say that today it's Shakespeare. Shakespeare for Ukrainian is the place which fuels and builds the nation. And it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague and friend, Professor Natalia Torkut, who is the head of the Ukrainian Shakespeare Center that she founded back in 2009, who is in Ukraine right now, who has initiated this amazing Ukrainian festival that is going on at the moment, Shakespeare Days in Ukraine. Back in 2023, Natalia went to Stratford-upon-Avon to toast the Bard's health and to give the toast to the immortal memory of William Shakespeare at the official lunch held in honor of the playwright's birthday. And it was so powerful, and it created such an impression, on everyone that it was reported in the Guardian and mentioned in the Prime Minister's questions. And now, Natalia, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much, Daria. And first of all, I would like to thank my dear colleagues from Bulgaria, my dear colleagues from European Shakespeare Association, and the students who invited me here. So it's really a great honor for me to speak today about the role of Shakespeare in Ukraine during one of the most challenging times in the history of the 21st century, the ongoing genocidal war of Russian Federation against my independent country. As we gather here today, we are reminded that war is not only a struggle of arms, but also a battle for the nation identity, for its culture, for its independence. But I'd like to emphasize that we are fighting not only for our freedom, for our territory, for our people, but for your freedom too. We are fighting for everlasting human values, which some dictators, regimes, I have to use plural here, regimes threaten to destroy. And I would like to tell you some words about the forms of representing Shakespeare in Ukraine today. And you can see that there are some of them. And the first of them is theater performances. And I would like to tell you some words about Shakespeare on Ukrainian stage today during the wartime. And I'd like to share my screen to show you the situation which took place in Ukraine in March. It seems to me it was 12th of March 2022. So it is the second or the third week of full-scale aggression. That period of time, a lot of refugees from the war zone and from the occupied territories had to leave their native places, their homes, and they went to the west. And in the western part of Ukraine, in the city of Ivano-Frankivsk, they found their shelter. Where? In the theater building. It is the theater building where they had to live, to sleep, to be together with their nearest and dearest, with their children, with their grandfathers and grandmothers. Some of them lost their
native people. Almost all of them lost their homes. And in this dramatic period of the life of our nation, in Ivano-Frankivsk, the theater, the director and his staff decided to stage Hamlet. And I invite you to be there, in that very shelter, in the basement of Ivano-Frankivsk theater, where this performance of Hamlet took place, and to listen to the famous monologue, To Be or Not to Be, which is proclaimed by Oleksiy Gnatkovsky, the extremely popular Ukrainian young actor, and imagine how these people who were his spectators felt that period of time during this monologue pronounced.
Чому більше гідності? Скоритись долі і гатити стріли? Чи опором зустріти чорні хвилі нещастя і ти розпинити їх? Заснути? Мер? І нічого. Лиш зазнати, як сон позбавить болю, нервів, тіла. А звідси й продовження страждань. Така розв'язка цілком годиться. Так? Заснути. Спати. І що? І сни дивитися. Проблема лише одна. Які нам сни присняться? Мертві. Коли земні марноти вічне. І тут стоїть вагання. Ще хоч трошки побути. Вік то бути свій. А звідси й продовження страждань. Якби не це, то хто із нас терпів би ці знущання? Ці утиски верхів, апломб нікчем, зневажене кохання, беззаконня, нахабство влади, напади на честь, якими прислуговується підлість. Хто став би це терпіти, якщо можна звичайним лезом вкоротити від усіх страждань? І хто тягнув би життєву лямку, якби не страх? А що там, після смерті? У тій країні з інших географій, звідки вже не прийдуть мандрівники. І страх нам каже витерпіти муки тут теж. Добре знань. І не шукати незнань. От вічне. Винен розум. Це він блідими робить нас і барви всіх поривів наших. А відважні наші плани по роздумах воліємо відкласти чи зовсім поховати. Хтось тут є?
So Alexei's Hamlet is looking at the sky, supposing that God hears his voice and our prayers. In Ukraine, Shakespeare's plays have long held a special place in the hearts of both artists and audiences. They are not just a source of intellectual and aesthetic engagement, but a means of understanding the complexities of our shared humanity. Especially in the time of crisis, Shakespeare's themes of struggle, resilience, justice, and the search for meaning in chaotic world have never been more relevant than they are today. And here you can see the scene from our Hamlet that took place just before full-scale aggression. It is a V theater, puppet theater, people and puppets. And here you can see some faces of Hamlet. There are 3 ipostasies of him in this play. Hamlet is really very important in Ukraine, and since the war started in 2014, we have 19 premieres of Hamlet on the Ukrainian stage. And why Hamlet is so popular? The answer to this question we can find in the work written by our colleague from Canada, the famous Shakespearean scholar Irina Makar. In The Condition of Colonialism and Post-Colonialism, Hamlet is an extremely dangerous play that raises too many questions without giving any answers, studies essence of evil as political and metaphysical problem, and discovers the correlation between action and intention, word and deed, the individual and society. And I would like to say that since 2014, we have had, in accordance with the results of the research of our theatrical analytic whose name is Sergei Vinichenko, we had 111 theater performances of Shakespeare plays staged across the country, reaching diverse audiences. Staged in the theaters that serve as shelters. And in the underground station, these performances are not mere renditions of the plays. They are acts of resistance, hope, and aesthetic experiments. And I'd like to show you some pictures from Romeo and Juliet that was done or performed by Ivano-Frankivsk Theatre by the director whose name is Rostislav Držipilsky. It's Romeo and Juliet, and a short video from this performance.
Небесне посвітління ще не світало.
Я думаю, що українську мову трошечки можна зрозуміти болгарським студентам. Ну, принаймні, мені буде дуже приємно, що ви слухаєте моєю мовою Шекспіра.
Водяна відблискує. То місяця не сонце. Так само і не жаліш під схопінням небесне спів. Насправді хочу я залишитись. Я не хочу йти. Скажи, і я лишуся. І загину. Нікуди я не йду, бо ще не те.
Тоді це собі перечуття. Дивлюся вниз на тебе. Ти стоїш такий блідий, так ніби ти вже мертвий. Вже в труні. Ти справді так мучить.
І я тебе також блідою бачу. Це смутно. Прикро.
In addition to these performances you have just seen, we have also maintained our annual project that is called Shakespeare Days in Ukraine. We started it just before, not just, but during the war, just before the full-scale aggression in 2018. And it has become a vital online platform for artists, scholars, and wide audiences to engage with Shakespeare's work. This online festival has proved to be an essential means of bringing together Shakespeare lovers from around the world, continuing to celebrate the bard's legacy and providing a space for reflection during these dark times. But it is also a testament of the strength and adaptivity of our community that we have been able to keep this tradition alive, even as the war destroys so much of our daily life. Moreover, Ukraine has hosted regular creative and research, research contests for university and school students, encouraging young people to explore Shakespeare's works in new and innovative ways, including those associated with digital technologies. Engagement with the youth is perhaps one of the most important aspects of our cultural response to the war, ensuring that the next generation of Ukrainian nation continues to understand the value of art, culture, and relevance of Shakespeare's works. And today we have a very interesting event in the framework of our Shakespeare Days in Ukraine project. It was the contest between the school students of 11-17 years old from 25 regions of Ukraine. It was held in 3 main nominations. The first is to make a picture, a photo, and to find the proper quotation or citation from Shakespeare. And this quote should be explained by the participant and demonstrate that Shakespeare is alive in Ukraine. The second nomination is video, and the third is interview. And I would like to show you short video that was represented today in the morning. I suppose that this girl will be one of the winners.
Attention, air raid alert. Proceed to the nearest shelter.
Thanks to this short video, all of us can understand what my country experiences now and how important the help of everybody, of the humanity, of all the countries, of ordinary common people all over the world, how your help is important. The sirens you have just heard are our everyday reality. And yet, amid the chaos of war, we are taking new steps to promote Shakespeare's legacy in Ukraine. Last year, we had a historic moment. The first edition of the Shakespeare Festival in Ukraine, which took place in Ivano-Frankivsk, marked a milestone in our cultural resistance. And I would like to ask, is it possible for me to show short interview which is subtitled in English? Is it possible, Georgi and Dasha, or we are pressed by time? If we are pressed by time...
Natalia, I don't want to limit you in any way, but yes, we are over the time limit, but I think if you think it's important, you should show it.
Thank you very much. So here you can see the information about our festival, which includes academic part also, not only 10 performances, 10 Shakespeare plays staged in Ivano-Frankivsk, but also academic part. But I would like to, instead of my slide where the information is represented, I would like to show you the person who is the greatest, probably, admirer of Shakespeare in my country. His name is Rostislav Držipilsky. He is the director of this festival, and here he is explaining why Shakespeare in the wartime.
Під час наймасштабнішої війни у Європі, часів Другої світової, наш театр оголошує про заснування українського шекспірівського фестивалю в Івано-Франківську. Чого ми так? Ми вважаємо, що саме зараз час створювати міжнародні платформи для посилення діалогу з світом. Наш театр використовує всі нагоди, аби за межами України доносити правдиву інформацію про війну Росії проти України, про війну на знищення української нації, про війну за нашу гідність і незалежність. Український шекспірівський фестиваль в Івано-Франківську стане ще одним відкритим мистецьким простором, який посилить наші голоси, який дасть можливість протистояти агресивній російській пропаганді, який розкаже світові про нас. Шекспір і війна міцно пов'язані в історії українського театру. 1920 рік. Перша україномовна шекспірівська вистава. Триває війна радянської армії з армією Української Народної Республіки. До перемоги совєтів і поневолення України лишилося зовсім трохи. В цей час Лесь Курбас ставить Макбета під Брамте. Прем'єра яйце. Часу немає. Актори голодні. Є 5 репетицій для того, аби змінити назавжди історію українського театру. 1943. Перший україномовний Гамлет на сцені Львівського оперного театру. Розпал Другої світової війни. Окупація України військами Третього рейху. Володимир Главацький Гамлет запитував себе, бути чи не бути українській нації. Відповідь на це питання залежить від нас сьогодні. Український Шекспір завжди про боротьбу і завжди про пошук відповідей на складні екзистенційні питання. Український Шекспір з'являється в часи катастроф, аби змінювати історію. Івано-Франківський національний академічний драматичний театр імені Івана Франка дякує усім ветеранам українського театру минулих літ, на чиїх плечах ми стоїмо. Дякує Збройним силам України за можливість бути і творити. Ми будемо робити все, що від нас залежить, аби українське мистецтво і українська мова звучали.
And there are the words Slava Ukraini, glory to Ukraine, and we usually answer glory to our heroes. And I would like to tell you some words which can be closely connected with our today's audience. At this festival, 2 performances were presented by student theater groups. The first was by the troupe from Alexander Zelderovich National Academy of Dramatic Art from Warsaw, Poland, who staged a modern play in Polish called Matulka. You can see them here. It is a contemporary interpretation or adaptation, is better to say, of Romeo and Juliet. And the second performance, that is called Date with William, was an original combination of the scenes from different Shakespeare's comedies, full of humor and comic atmosphere. It sounded like a hymn to art, to joy, and to life itself. And on this occasion, I would like to express the hope that one day the theater of the New Bulgarian University will present its own Shakespearean production at Ukrainian Shakespeare Festival in Ivano-Frankivsk after our victory over the bloody Russian regime. And Shakespeare works offer us not just a way to escape, but the way to confront our reality. These themes of tyranny, oppression, betrayal, and the struggle for justice resonate with us deeply in these times. And yet Shakespeare also offers us hope. His universal words remind us that our struggles, though they are so overwhelming, are a part of a much larger human story. A few years before the Russian invasion in Ukraine, the director Alexei Kravchuk, who is in the front now, staged a haunting and visionary production of Hamlet in Luhansk city. This city that would soon become a front line in the war. In his deeply symbolic interpretation, buildings on the screen placed on the stage collapsed in ruins, and then they rise again before the eyes of the audience. And at the end, we have hope. We have a chance to see how all these buildings are growing up again. And at the time when this performance was staged, it seemed a bold artistic gesture, but now it feels like a theatrical prophecy. And nowadays, Shakespeare's presence in Ukraine during this war is much more than just a cultural defiance. It is an act of resistance. It is a declaration that no matter of obstacles, we will continue to create, to think, to imagine, and to dream. And today, Shakespeare is widely used as a means of art therapy, as an important tool which helps us to survive. And here you can see the performance which was done by Alexei Gnatkovsky. You have seen him today as Hamlet, and he is also a theater director who produced the 12th night with the theater of veterans who participated in this war. Unfortunately, some of the actors are not alive today, because after the performance that took place just before the full-scale aggression, some of them returned to the front, and some of them died. And here you can see our friend Kelly Hunter from London, the director of Flute Theatre, who organized a very important set of events in Bulgaria, in Sofia. And I would like to thank her and Daria Lazarenko for organizing it seems to me we had 4 or even 5 events with Kelly Hunter and Flute Theatre, who helped our children with autistic spectrum and children who suffered post-traumatic syndrome after being in Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and who found their shelter thanks to you in Bulgaria. And thank you very much to your nation, to the people of Bulgaria, for helping Ukrainians in these dark times. And Kelly Hunter, together with Daria Lazarenko and Dasha, I'm sorry, I've forgotten how to pronounce
Georgi
Nyagolov, and to the friends from your volunteering group, Maria and
Maria and Andrei from Open Doors for
Yes, Open Doors for Ukraine. Thank you very much for this help. Shakespeare is really healing. And moreover, Shakespeare is a part of our everyday volunteering life. In the first days of full-scale aggression, at the end of February, we created a volunteering group that is called Shakespeare. And thanks to our colleagues from all over the world, thanks to Shakespearean, we are able to gather some money to buy important things for the armed forces of Ukraine. And here you can see a very symbolic thing. It is a drone with the sign, and on it there is the word Shakespeare UA. It was bought thanks to Michael Dobson, the director of Shakespeare Institute, who gave us his award, which was given to him by Craiova Festival, 1,000 pounds, and we bought this drone, and the boys who are the soldiers of Ukrainian army decided to call this drone, you know that some drones which are too close to their hearts, these drones have their own names. And this drone is called Shakespeare. So today Shakespeare is under Zaporizhia front, and Shakespeare is fighting for Ukraine. So, to finish my presentation, I'm sorry if I take too much of your time. I'd like to mention that Shakespeare in Ukraine is a reminder that even in the hardest of times, art cannot be silenced. The muses should never stay silent. They should speak up for those whose voices must be heard by the world. In As You Like It, a play that you watched today and will be discussing in a couple, or maybe in an hour or in a couple of hours, Shakespeare writes, "Hereafter, in a better world than this, I shall desire more love and knowledge of you." And I very much hope that we will meet again soon, both online and maybe offline and maybe in Ukraine. And I would like to thank my Bulgarian friends, Boyka Sokolova, Katis Stavreva, Alexander Shurbanov, Georgi Nyagolov, Daria Lazarenko, Yavor Gardiev, and maybe some others who help us during these terrible days of war. From the bottom of my heart, thank you very much for the permanent support Ukraine. I wish Shakespeare Festival at New Bulgarian University the best of luck and many new editions as interesting and inspiring as this one. And I invite all of you to Ukraine, where, as you will see, Shakespeare is all around us, even in the shelter and underground. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalia, for this moving talk. I think it is hard to have a discussion and to have any academic questions after this talk. We just like to say we all stand with Ukraine, and we all hope this ends well and ends soon.
Thank you.
And now I give the floor to my Bulgarian friend, Daria, to say the final words.
I would like to thank everyone who has been a part of this inspiring and very touching event, which has connected the dots into a splendid pattern. I hope that this event today is only the beginning of a series of similar events, and we will keep coming together and looking for inspiration inside the black box. And I hope that next time we will see how this initiative has sparkled curiosity and the desire to experiment and to look for new paths for all of us. And I wish all of you to be as inspired as we are today. And once again, I thank you, dear participants. I thank everyone who is in the audience right now. And I wish everyone love and joy and peace and health. Thank you.
Thank you. I wish you all the best.
Thanks.
Thank you. This is wonderful.
Thank
you. We can leave the meeting, right? Thank you for this wonderful festival, too. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to see you, Kirilka, here.
Yes, you too, Natalia.
Thank you very much. I often remembered our meeting in Craiova.
I hope it won't be too long before we see each other in person.
I suppose that one day after our victory, I'll have a happy chance to see you here in Ukraine at our
I would love that.
Yeah.
I would love that. I would love that. Okay.
And thank you, dear Dasha and Georgi, for inviting me. It was really an honor for me and important. It was really very important for me to speak about Ukraine. Maybe I took too much time of yours. I'm sorry.
No, don't worry at all. It was just
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. But, Georgi, you have mentioned that my Bulgarian friend, I would like to say, if you have the same shots with these beautiful stripes, I see it, but at the same time, Dasha, who was born in Ukraine, he will be Ukrainian forever. Ukrainian and Bulgarian is the same person.
I'm a Bulgarian and Ukrainian friend.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, it's a great pleasure to see you. Hello, my dear friend. I'm so happy to see you here again.
We were, yes, in the next room.
We're in the next room. We're following everything from, with the students there.
Thank you.
And this is on the right, this is Mari, who staged a performance which is called The Corridor, and it's about the Ukrainian refugees in Bulgaria. Also very, very moving performance.
Wow, it's great. And if you have maybe some videos from your performance, we will be happy to put it on our site. We have a blog that is called Theater Fishing. It is about theater, and there it will be very interesting and important for us, and probably it will be pleasant for you to introduce your performance about Ukraine. And yeah, so Dasha will get us in contact, and I will help you to get acquainted with Sergei Yunichenko, who is a theater blogger. His blog is very, very popular among theater practitioners in Ukraine. It is on the highest level, and I do believe that he will be greatly interested in contacts with you personally, and maybe in you will become friends, I hope, I do believe, and he'll be able to share the information about your performance, okay?
Yes, we'll do it. All right.
So, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You see, this day, God was on our side, because I have no, during these 2 hours, I have no air alerts at all.
Yes, and we had a rainbow, a huge rainbow just outside the building. I think it's a great sign.
It's great, yes, it's a great sign.
But we were in the black box, so we could see.
But if in the black box we can see a rainbow, it's also a sign.
And you were in a black box, and I was in complete panic at the moment. The rainbow.
Bye-bye, dear friends. Thank you very much.